Hey, what's up guys, it's Connor, and today I'm going to be doing a book review for Animal Control: The Hero's Apprentice by Travis Howe. I did receive this book in exchange to do this review, so that's what I'm going to be doing today. Travis Howe is an animator, and this is his first novel. The Hero's Apprentice has been described as like Zootopia mixed with The Incredibles. I definitely agree with the Zootopia vibe. It's the society of animals, anthropomorphic animals, and it follows a main character who is a rabbit, and the rabbit wants to be a part of this police force that's called Animal Control. So it is similar to Zootopia in those respects, but all of the people that work for Animal Control all have superpowers, and that's where the Incredibles part comes in. I think that it's more similar to maybe My Hero Academia, where the characters that have superpowers go to this academy to train to be a part of Animal Control and have mentors and everything like that. And there's also some other elements that I think might be a little similar to My Hero Academia. So I would say that it is Zootopia mixed with My Hero Academia. This is actually an homage to 90s action cartoons, which I was really enjoying all of those different elements. So I'll probably talk about that a little bit more when I get to my pros. But as I said, we follow this bunny slash rabbit that is called Jack Roberts, and at the beginning of the book he's living in this really terrible orphanage, and the other animals that live there bully him, and he just wants to be like his hero, which is the leader of Animal Control. His name is King, the King of Hearts. His actual name is Aaron Harding, I believe. And basically at the beginning of the book he's involved in an accident which results in the death of his hero. Then the story takes off from there. There is a bit of a time jump, so after the first couple of chapters there's like a 5-year time jump, and then it picks up with Jack as he's living in a small town and dealing with everything that has happened in his life, as well as trying to figure out where he wants his life to go in the future. Now we'll just jump right into the review. As usual with my book reviews, I'm going to go through my pros, go through my cons, give you my rating, and be done. I actually do have a couple of neutrals though that we'll also go over at some point. My first pro for this book is that it is an homage to 90s cartoons. You can definitely pick up on those 90s cartoons vibes. We have that tragic hero past, but he's destined to be something more. There's actually a rat mentor that's in this book that reminded me of the rat mentor in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. There might be some maybe Mufasa Scar vibes going on with King and with his cousin. So it's going to be one of those novels that children are going to really appreciate it for its action, adventure, fast-paced nature, and adults might also still enjoy this because they'll be able to pick up on different little Easter eggs that he's put into the story if you were also a 90s cartoon watcher. Another thing that I really liked was all of these different powers. King specifically reminded me of some powers in My Hero Academia, so I was really liking that connection. I don't think that there's actually supposed to be a connection, but I liked that. With these powers, sometimes they're related to the species of animal that they are. Jack Roberts might be a little bit more lucky than your everyday normal animal. One of the characters is a frog. He has like a really long tongue and can use it to jump around and stick to stuff and get himself pulled. It's almost like a grappling hook, but it hits its tongue. Another thing that I really liked was that the author was good about bringing little things through the novel. So little jokes that happen at the beginning or just little asides will come back up later on in the story and you'll recognize those things. And I just really liked that because it rewarded you for a deeper reading or making sure you picked up on those little things. For instance, at one point they're talking about slogans and stuff like that, like what you're gonna say if you were ever to be a superhero kind of thing after you do some cool move. And then that kind of comes up a little bit later on, and I actually did laugh when I read that. I mentioned this a little bit before, but this is a very action-packed, very plot-driven story. I tend to really love plot-driven stories. I love some character-driven stories as well, don't get me wrong, but I love a good page-turner, and that is exactly what this is. I think that middle grade and children readers will really be able to fly through this novel because there's something happening on every single page that keeps you reading. It also has that thing at the end of chapters, little baby cliffhangers that keep you reading as well, so you finish the chapter and then you have to know what's going to happen next, so you turn the page and start the next one. I think after like the first couple of chapters you're hooked and you're just going to read the whole thing straight through. I read it in like a day and a half. Another thing that I really liked about this was how wide this world is and how many different areas he could explore using Jack. I think that there's a lot more adventure to come in the rest of this trilogy. I forgot to say that this is the first book in a trilogy. And so in the next couple of books, I think there's a lot more adventure to be had, and I think that Jack is one of those characters that you're going to be able to easily root for and want to follow through his different adventures. There are some mysteries that get thrown into the mix at the very end of this book that you really want to know the answers to, so it keeps you wanting more while also giving you a bit of a satisfying ending for this first book. Like the first main problem that he's tackling, you get some catharsis, but there's a lot more mystery that you want to know the answers to. I think one of the biggest pros for me for this book was that when I read through this novel, there was a couple of things that I was like unsure about. I actually ended up emailing the author and he did more research and actually ended up changing some of those things. So that was a big pro for me personally, because I really appreciate when someone can be like, oh, you know what, that does sound off, or you know what, that could be taken the wrong way and I don't want it to be taken like that, so let me change these things. So I really liked that. I'm purposely being vague. Another thing that I really liked in this was that there's a group of people that are kind of ostracized from society. I don't like that they were ostracized from society, but I like the way that it was handled. These people have different, did I say people? I meant animals. This group of animals have a different way of living and have different priorities and have just a different culture and a different frame of mind than most of the other animals in this book have, and I like that certain characters bring that up and point out how treating them terribly because they just think differently than you is a bad thing. So I thought that it talked about discrimination in a good and responsible way. So there are some really good messages that people and middle grade readers alike are going to be able to pull out of this novel as they're going through. And the last pro that I'm going to talk about, because my battery is dying, I'm going to have to change that. Okay, so I think I just finished talking about the nomads, the group that's discriminated against. The last pro that I'm going to talk about, because I don't want this to be overly long, is that I ended up being so emotionally invested in Jack and his story. I didn't realize how invested I was until the end of the story, when events start to happen and I was like really excited or really upset because bad things were happening to him or good things were happening to him. I think what ended up making that happen is I think that Travis Howe did like the perfect amount of reflection through the story. And by that I mean Jack thinks about everything that's happened before in the story occasionally as he's going on his adventure, and I think that that's very realistic. I don't think that it's realistic when someone leaves their home or something tragic happens that they would just not think about it for the entirety of their adventure and then think about it later on. I think that it would pop up in the little down moments, and that's what happens with Jack. He thinks about his found family and he thinks about his friends, he thinks about his mentor, and he thinks about all of these things that are happening and how overwhelming they could be, but he doesn't do it so much that it becomes annoying, because that is a problem that happens sometimes. So I think that it was the perfect amount of self-reflection going on with Jack, and so because of that I ended up being so invested in him and wanted him to succeed and be happy. Now I'm going to talk about a couple of cons that I had. One of my pros that I said earlier on was that the animal's powers sometimes relate to the species of animal that they are, and for me I thought it made a lot of sense that the animals would have powers related to how they were. Sometimes that is not the case. Like sometimes an animal that has nothing to do with water and actually lives in a desert will have powers over water, but I liked when there was a relationship between the species of animal and their powers. Besides the animals being animals, there could have been a lot more traits carried through from their animal natures. Certain characters don't seem very animal-like because they don't really exhibit any animal traits, so they could have just been humans. For instance, Jack is a snowshoe hare, and they're called snowshoe hares because they have really large feet that prevent them from sinking in snow. But sometimes in the novel, Jack is having a hard time getting through snow, and I'm like, he wouldn't sink down in snow because he has such large feet that he would stay above it. I thought maybe the squirrel character would hide things and then forget where they were hidden, or Jack would twitch his nose, you know how rabbits do. Little things like that I think could have added a lot more to the story and shown more animal characteristics. And that's not to say that there weren't things that were like that. Like at one point the frog character complains that his skin is gonna dry out. One of the characters is a penguin and his house is kept extremely cold because penguins need to be a bit colder. So there were elements of that kept, but I was kind of expecting a little bit more, but it wasn't a huge con for me. It's just something that I noticed. And my only other con that I had written down was that sometimes I had a hard time keeping track of characters. There are a lot of characters in this, and sometimes when a character would pop up, I couldn't remember what kind of animal they were, or if they had superpowers, or if they had another name that I was supposed to also remember. I think one thing that contributed to this was that I thought that all of the characters' dialogue seemed similar to each other. There wasn't a ton of characters who spoke differently than any other character. There is one specific instance that I think that the character sounds a lot like Galadriel from Lord of the Rings, and that actually confused me because I didn't understand what she was trying to say, but I thought that some of the characters from rural areas would have a more rural accent versus some of the characters that are more urban based. I don't know. You might not have any problems keeping track of characters, but for me, I did have a couple of times where I had to flip back and try to find when the character was first introduced. So now I'm going to talk about a couple of neutrals that I had. The first one is that I didn't understand the political structure of this world very much. So most of the animals that are in this book are all prey animals, they're all herbivores, and there are some exceptions like the lion, and there's a couple of predatory birds that are, you know, allowed to be in the society. I forgot to mention in the world building part that there's this big barrier that cuts off this northern section of animals from the ones that we follow in this story. They're sectioned off because they don't want to live in peace, and they're very violent and they want to kill and eat the other animals. So I didn't know exactly why certain ones were allowed to stay versus other ones not being allowed to stay, and all of that. Like, why do we have lions mixed in with all of these bunnies and squirrels and deer, but not other animals? You know, stuff like that. There's just some missing information, but I think that we're going to end up getting that in the second book, just because of everything that happens in this one. One other thing is that all of the animals bark a lot of things. So instead of saying Jack said blank, it'll say Jack barked blank, and a lot of animals bark, which I thought was interesting because I think that, like, if it's a sheep it would bleat, if it's a frog it would croak, stuff like that, but a lot of animals bark. And my last neutral that I'm going to talk about is that this book uses the pass out method. So a lot of middle grade novels, and a lot of middle grade novels following main male protagonists, end up using this method where the characters pass out a lot to drive tension and to drive the plot forward, and that's what happens in this one. Jack ends up passing out like all the time, and so the next chapter starts off with him waking up. I don't get bothered by that, but I know some people will get annoyed that he's passing out so much, but it's an easy way to get readers hooked and to get them moving on and to turn the next page and to find out what situation Jack's got himself into next. I enjoy it for the tension and everything like that, but not everyone is going to. So that's going to be my review on The Hero's Apprentice by Travis Howe. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up and comment down below if you've read this book already. I'm guessing you haven't because it's not actually out yet. I will leave links down in the description to where you can pre-order this book if you would like to. I'll also leave a link down in the description to the author's website where you can check out more about the book if you would like to do that as well. If you have any suggestions for books that are similar to this, let me know those down in the comments. Anything else you want me to know, leave it down below, and I will talk to you guys next time.